It's John DeVadoss here, man. It's good to be back again at Reimagine. Always a pleasure to discuss with you and the team. I lead up development for Neo, based in Seattle, Washington. Previously spent almost 2 decades at Microsoft, building and architecting the .NET platform for the company.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the second edition of Reimagine 2020. I'm your host today, Adam. Glad to have you join us for another exciting discussion with John DeVadoss here, one of the leaders over there at Neo, and we're happy to kind of engage with him even more. Welcome back. So first of all, if you missed the first Reimagine conference back in May, please visit Reimagine 2020 at ri2020.io, or you can check out the Reimagine 2020 YouTube channel, where you can watch all 60 plus interviews on blockchain, crypto trends, and industry insights. But without further ado, let me go ahead and reintroduce John back to the show here. Glad to have you back. How you doing today?
Hey, Adam, very good, man. Thank you for having me back. I appreciate it. Always a pleasure to discuss with you and the team. And again, just to remind folks, based in Seattle, lead development for Neo, and previously spent about 20 years at Microsoft working on the .NET platform. So.
Awesome. No, appreciate that. Neo is one of our partners, you know, on the education front. You know, MouseBelt has a blockchain and education campaign. We have alliance members, and Neo is one of them. And our goal there is just to kind of shed light on how blockchain, you know, touches all aspects of life, whether it's enterprise, whether it's the startup world, you know, society, impact, environmental impact. So super stoked to have you guys part of that. We've been working with you guys for a little bit. And I know you interviewed with us, you know, a few months back, which is a great discussion for all of you watching. You know, please go to the website and you can catch that. But let's go ahead and dive right into this. You know, let's kind of get your background. I've been talking to various lead developers. I've been talking to regulators. I've been talking to enterprises, and even at the startup world. You know, give us a little bit of your background, because I feel like you touched on all that. You're a little bit developer, a little bit enterprise, and now you're in the blockchain space, which is kind of a cool jump. So before we get into Neo and kind of what you guys are working on, I want to know who John is, right? And tell me your journey from, I think you were working on other technologies before blockchain. And when did it click? Like, when did it all make sense? I want to hear your story, your journey.
All right, man. I'll give you the story. I'll keep it short, though, right? So. Cool. So first of all, I mean, as you can probably guess, I'm from India originally. I grew up in East Africa, in Tanzania. So for folks in the audience who speak Swahili, Habarigani, I did my PhD work in machine learning. So spent many years in the AI space, about 20 years working on platforms, Adam, for Microsoft. I'm a platforms guy. You know, I love developers. I understand developers, and I know how developers think. And having built platforms and tools for millions of developers globally with the .NET stack, I feel like there's one thing that is really my core strength, apart from the AI and the machine learning and the enterprise stuff, is the developer focus. And of course, as you said, over the last 2 years, based up in Seattle, leading up developer focus for Neo here, with a very successful set of tools thus far, Adam, which we can talk again, and certainly in good detail over the next few minutes.
So you get into machine learning and AI, and I'm sure we'll touch on that at some point throughout this whole discussion.
Yeah, I would love that, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think the technology, you know, blockchain is part of the stack, right? It's a tool, it's another arsenal, you know, ammo, right, to build things. So you're doing all this, and then, first of all, blockchain is kind of it's a buzzword in the sense of cryptography has been around, distributed systems has been around, and can you tell us kind of how you came into blockchain, or what was leading up to, like, you know, again, you were doing this other technology, and now you're seeing blockchain, and you're saying that you're building platforms and systems. So where were you at, and what year was this when you started started diving more into blockchain technology?
Yeah, so fantastic question. You know, I have my own story of how I got into the rabbit hole, right? So first of all, as a platform guy, Adam, you know, my strength, my focus has been on building the server-side technologies, right? So less on the front end or the UX, if you will. So that took me down the path of building systems of services, which are obviously distributed. and then eventually decentralized. So there was a very natural path for me as a platform guy to eventually, one way or the other, encounter distribution and decentralization and the blockchain stack. But to answer your question, circa 2012 or so, it's the first time really, I actually bought Bitcoin back in the day. And of course, there's a few I kept and there's a few I lost. I have no idea what happened to those laptops from back then. And, it's anyway, history, right, at this point. Yeah. But the real foray into blockchain, Adam, was during my first startup. And I was working on the AI space at that time. And so I went back in and I said, hang on a second. This is a real platform. It's now ready. I mean, developers can build apps. We have the maturity to truly build global class, global scale apps. And that was the light bulb for me when I said, you know what, I've done this AI thing. It's not going anywhere, right? And blockchain is really where I want to spend the rest of my career working on. And what do I do best is I build tools. And I saw Neo, the Neo architecture, Adam, for me, is very well designed for scale, especially with respect to commercial scenarios. And there was a natural, sort of fit, if you will. Talked to Eric and Hong Fei, and we said, what is the place that platforms are being built? And we said Seattle, because of Amazon Web Services, Windows Azure, the Google Cloud, and so on. So it kind of made sense for us to build an office in Seattle with a very clear mission focused on attracting millions and millions of developers. I'll give you one data point, yeah?
So what year is this? So you come across Bitcoin in 2012, and then when did you join Neo?
Neo, 2018, okay. But my foray into the blockchain space was circa 2015. Yeah. When I really became serious about this notion. There is a real platform. There is a commercial platform. There is value to be created, to be built, right? And that was the big aha for me.
And what was that? Was that like Ethereum at the time, or were there other platforms that were coming out?
It was Neo and Ethereum. So 2015 was when the Neo project was actually launched on GitHub as an open source MIT licensed project. So looking at Neo, looking at the Neo code base, looking at the work Eric had done, and of course, listening and watching Hong Fei and Vitalik and others, it was a very good time, in the sense of the platform opening up. And that's when I said, look, this is it, man. This is my future for the next 10, 20 years. I want to go build tools because I know how developers think, and that's why I'm up here in Seattle.
Yeah, and I think that's really important and a critical component of understanding the developer community, and we'll get into that shortly. To go back a little bit in the sense of where are we on this timeline, right? Bitcoin comes out in 2008-9. Ethereum comes out and Neo comes out and maybe like one or two others during 2014, 2015. Where are we on this spectrum of like, I've heard you mention, we're watching the trailer, like that was end of last year. Have we matured, high level? Obviously we're maturing much more, but where are we at it, are we in the first, second inning of this game, or, still at the, buying a ticket?
No, very good question. So you're right. I did mention this mental model of we are watching the trailer and the movie is yet to play. But in all seriousness, Adam, the way I think about this is if you look at history, if you look at the history of the internet, for about 2 decades, it was all about core infrastructure, DNS and TCP/IP and so on and so forth. But somewhere around 1994, all of a sudden, this thing called the web happened. And the web drove explosive growth for the internet. And the reason I bring this history here is if you look at the blockchain space, I would say for the last decade, we have been very focused on the infrastructure, on the chains and the protocols and the transactions and the integrity, all good stuff, right? But the same way that the web came in and it exploded in terms of usage and value creation, I see that the next phase for us, Adam, is what I think of as asset digitization, right? And that will essentially light the fire, in my opinion, where all of a sudden people won't be saying blockchain. It's just there. It's pervasive. It's everywhere, right? And that's what I see happening over the next 2 to 3 years, and especially as we look at both consumer and commercial/enterprise. And that, if you believe in history, if you look back in history, there's a very clear parallel in terms of the underlying pattern.
And so to even follow up on your internet, an analogy, which is accurate, and for some people that are watching that may not know the history, right? The internet was developed in sometime in the 60s, and it was meant for education, and it was backed by the Department of Defense, and the communication, right? And as you mentioned, a lot of the protocols at that point were meant for information sharing and like other ways, obviously, to communicate. And now you fast forward to the early 90s, and this thing kind of blows up. And so what you're saying is
in a good way, rose up in a good way.
Yeah, in a good way, right? We're all using applications, and we're starting to turn it into a utility of how the masses and the normal average person can leverage it. And then it's just it's grown from there. Now we have e-commerce, and now we're leading into blockchain. And so totally agree with you on that front. And would you say, we've had on our end, we've had a lot of discussions on the DeFi space and kind of where we're at and where the money's going. But to circle it back to the internet, metaphor or analogy, is that we're building out, like you said, we're building out those protocols, and the Web 2.0 is not meant for what we're building now and what our vision is on the digitalization, tokenized assets, value of remittance and payments, right? And so we're building all that out, right? And so, so on the spectrum of, so we're still at the beginning, or so we're in that first 10-year period of this internet?
So I believe we're on the cusp
of
where the web was back in circa 94, right? 93, 94. I believe we are there on the cusp of that with respect to how, like you said, the web was able to explode in terms of usage. I see assets, digitization as being the explosive growth for us. So like I said, over the next 18 months, 2 years, I think we're going to see this proliferation globally. Now, of course, if you look at the economic environment, right, I think there is another catalyst for us, especially looking at the way, central banks are functioning or misfunctioning, if you will, to say, with respect to interest rates and so on. So that is, I believe, catalyzing both finance and DeFi in the blockchain sector, Adam.
Which brings to another point, for those watching, is when they, Bitcoin is blockchain, but Bitcoin isn't blockchain as a whole. And blockchain isn't Bitcoin, it's an application on blockchain. So what you're talking about is this our kind of economic environment of stimulus packages and, various countries, hyperinflation, and I think the lines get blurred for the masses of what you're talking about. And there's crypto, and then there's also like distributed ledger technology on the enterprise side, like the blockchain kind of distributed systems. What's your take on kind of the crypto and the blockchain, which kind of will lead me into other questions regarding decentralization and centralization, even on enterprise and consumer. But you brought up some financial things. So what are your takes on the crypto side, which are a little bit different than the blockchain application side in a way?
No, it's a very, very good question, Adam. The way I see this is like this. So you're right, there is the blockchain platform, the infrastructure or the plumbing, if you will. And there are things like Bitcoin and Neo and Ethereum and so on. So I don't think of Bitcoin as an application, Adam, because to say it's an app does not do it justice. To me, it's more of an institution with the governance models. For example, things like halving, right? That is not an app scenario, it's an institution. So why do I emphasize this point? Because again, going back in time, looking at computing, we have seen multiple platforms, mainframes and PCs and client server and the web. But Adam, in history, there has never been an economic platform, meaning a platform that embeds and intrinsically exposes economic protocols. So when people say crypto versus blockchain or blockchain versus crypto, I think unfortunately they're kind of missing the point, which is what makes this the first economic platform is what makes it unique. And this is why, if you look at the enterprise space, for example, many large companies are struggling to be successful. You know why? Because they say blockchain, not crypto. And so they throw the baby with the bathwater, right? It is those crypto economic protocols that make this platform unique in history. And this is why, we are seeing a lag in the commercial adoption. Eventually we'll get there. But for me, it's an economic platform. It is a crypto economic platform. And yes, the plumbing is a blockchain-based infrastructure, but these apps aren't really apps. They're more like institutions, both consumer and commercial.
And to go off of that, to feed off of that, this isn't the first attempt of an economic, platform. Wasn't there DigiCash? And are you familiar with any of those previous at a high level? Again, we have viewers that may not know that there were some other attempts at digitizing currency. And you might have been in that era. Did you follow any of that history of the cypherpunks and them attempting to do this DigiCash stuff?
Absolutely, and you're right. I certainly will date myself here, but I was quite active in the in this sector at that time. With one distinction there, Adam, in my opinion, the way I see it is back then, kind of the first wave, if you will, they were not trying to build a platform. They were building, if you will, the end scenario, which is cash, right? With blockchain, with Ethereum, with Neo, what we have is an economic platform, meaning, it opened up the possibility because people now can go build, you could clone, you could build new, you could innovate, you could pioneer. And when I say economic, because the protocols are intrinsic, and this means that you have the ability to create an incentive model, right? Life is about incentives, not just economics. Life is about incentives. Society is about incentives. Commerce is about incentives. And no platform in the history of computing has ever had an intrinsic incentive model. You had to overlay and kind of add on and build on top of, right? Which obviously is friction, which requires governance and so on and so forth. With the blockchain platform, it's all in there. There is no extrinsic set of governance or compliance and so on. It's all built in. And this to me is the magic of the crypto economic stack that we have. And we in the consumer side, I think we have seen the light earlier, and the commercial sector, because of the baggage they carry with respect to crypto, they are still struggling to figure out how they get there, but we will help them get there. And
so, we're going to get into Neo in a little bit here, but I'm just trying to, getting these great thoughts and insights, right? We have some, there's so many projects out there, and we kind of all get ahead of ourselves because we're in this bubble, we're in this industry, and we kind of know what's going on. And so I just try to rewind it a little bit for our viewers and our audience that are just tuning in to figure out what Neo is, right? Or who are these people building this stuff and why? Where did they come from? And there's a long history. We just talked about the history of the internet, right? We just talked about previous attempts of this internet money, which, as you mentioned, was kind of on the end user, and blockchain has kind of flipped that and building the infrastructure so that we can get to that decentralization of an economic platform. And so again, we'll get into Neo shortly and kind of what you guys are working on and how you're implementing all of this stuff, right? Kind of the vision. But before we get there, ask a few more questions about
sure.
you. So what are you following here in the space, right? We have this DeFi boom. At first it was, or not at first, but gaming was heavily involved. There's some identity. What are you personally following? There at one point there was a lot of protocols. It seems like that's kind of there's the Neos of the world, and of course your Ethereums and your Litecoins and all that. What are you following right now as far as this space, and what's very interesting to you? What do you see?
So I see this notion of DeFi as I'm very bullish on DeFi in the long term, Adam. I believe this is the future with respect to assets. But I want to clarify, right? When I say I'm very bullish about the future, I'm saying that DeFi is not just for crypto assets, it's for any and all assets, right? We're going to see DeFi for security tokens, for securities, for real estate, right? I mean, the world is our oyster. So in terms of how this will transform, I am absolutely convinced. In the short term, however, I think there will be some bubbles that will be burst as we learn and figure our way. So that's why in the very short term, I would be perhaps a little bit more thoughtful in terms of how and where to focus. But in the long run, over the next 5-7 years, this is here to stay, right? This is about getting power back to the common man and woman. It is about taking out the rent-seeking parasites in the middle. So that is a given. There is no going back on this, right? But what I want to see is I want to open it up. We call this the smart economy vision, right? Open it up, open the economy, right? Any and all assets will be tokenized, will be fractionalized, and will be DeFi'd, right? And that is my belief, and this is my conviction.
And I think we're heading in that, obviously, we're going in that direction, and things come first. The groundwork has been laid. What do you think about the infrastructure play right now in the sense of the landscape? So I'm talking about custody solutions, the payment rails, wallets, exchanges are being developed, like at one point a lot. There's some big ones right now. There's some other smaller ones. Are you satisfied with kind of where we're at as an industry? Obviously the goal is to increase adoption down the road, streamline usage, on and off ramps and stuff like that. How do you see like the infrastructure sustaining right now? Are you satisfied?
No, I'm not. I mean, obviously, we're making some big investments with respect to, like you said, adoption and usage and consumption, but also in terms of the experience, we have to make it really, really usable, very simple, right? Again, not to go back in history, but I'll give you another example, Adam. Again, I'm going to date myself here.
Great.
Look at the history of the web and the browsers, right? At one point, there was a browser called the Mosaic browser. That was the first one from I believe, the University of Illinois, right? And Mosaic is no more. There was also the Netscape browser, which was there for a couple of years. And that was a very, very popular browser. But Netscape does not exist anymore. So my point is this, that we are seeing these spurts of innovation, of pioneering innovation, but we haven't seen anything yet, right? We are laying the seeds for tomorrow. And there will be winners, and there will be obviously people like Netscapes of the world that will disappear. But the bottom line is the trend is unstoppable, right? So of course, we would like to play a very big part in the future in building tomorrow, but it's not going to be a single chain future. It'll be a multi-chain future. It'll be a multi-stack future, right? But all of this, Adam, all of this will happen only if one thing happens, which is if we get the 20+ million developers globally to find a part to play and a role to play in building tomorrow, right? So I have this mental model, having worked for almost 2 decades at Microsoft, I led architecture for the .NET platform. I have this mental model. People say, developers, and it's about making life easier, obviously making them productive, making it fun. For me, it's this, right? I would tell my teams, let's not make development like hiking up a mountain. There's a trail and a map and a compass. You got a plan, face by face, step by step. No. Developing ought to be like skiing downhill. You have your skis and boom, there you go. It's fun. It's fast, right? It's productive, right? And that's kind of our mental model at Neo as we build our tools for developers is it like skiing downhill or is it like climbing up? Right? And there are obviously many, many chains in this space, but we believe because of our heritage and our understanding of the developer mindset that we are quite far ahead of many of the others in this particular space.
And so let's kind of get into it. That's a great transition into Neo. We just talked about the foundational layers. Neo is one of the successful projects that has been around for a really long time from the early days. You guys are still growing and expanding and working on critical components of again, the infrastructure. So appreciate kind of your journey, your thoughts on how blockchain should look is what you're telling me, right? As easy as possible, streamlined as possible, but putting in the work at the bottom to make sure that it's easy, we can go downhill. So let's get into Neo then. Give us, a quick overview of Neo's goals and objectives. And, you know, again, there's a lot of blockchains out there. So what's kind of your focus and mission as far as NEO?
So thank you, Adam, for the kind words. We are very thankful. So you're right. There are obviously many projects and many chains and many protocols. But if you go back, 5-6 years, the vision that we laid out for NEO is to realize what we call the smart economy, meaning it's about digitizing assets. So even 5 years ago, we were very clear. It's about more than crypto assets. It's about the real world. Tokenize the planet, if you will, is kind of really our mantra. So to that effort, as you said, over the last 4 or 5 years, the building blocks, the protocols, obviously the integrity of the core infrastructure, but more recently in terms of tooling. For example, about a year ago, Adam, we shipped probably at that point what is the industry-leading debugging experience on a blockchain. Previously, the notion of debugging a smart contract, was just a nightmarish experience. Doing print-offs and log statements and so on. Not only did we make debugging on NEO comparable to debugging a Lambda function on Amazon Web Services or an Azure function for Microsoft, we went one more step. We have what is called time travel debugging, meaning you can step forward and step back in time to understand and isolate as a developer what exactly happened, what was going on, right? And all of this is just one example of many, right? But this notion of time travel debugging is to give you a perspective of the kind of thinking we are applying in this space. Because for me, we have to go to the developers. We cannot make them come to us, right? There are many platforms say, look, we have the tools, come to us. It's not going to happen. The build it and they will come is only in the movies, right? So for us, for me, the 20 million developers is make it as easy, as productive, and as fun as skiing. And then, they will build, they will use the tools, and they will help us realize tomorrow's mission.
No, that's great. And I think, you're listening, right, to, which is an important understanding that it seems like you guys are taking real serious, is that you're listening to the community. You already have this extensive background. You've been through, serious, various landscapes in the tech world on how to build platforms and systems and like what people want. And, we have a lot of projects right now and a lot of founders, a lot of investors, trying to understand, how to position themselves. And I think, it's very important to evolve with the market. It's also very important to listen to who you're catering to, right. To make sure that it's seamless and you understand, their pain points. Because you just said it, I used to hear it all the time, build it and they will come. But like, we all know there's been how many blockchains that have not, that have the best technology, but don't have users, don't have developers. Right. And then you have some technologies that are maybe not, at the top of the food chain, or not even close, but have users, have adoption, and it seems like what I'm trying to say to everybody watching is like product market fit, like adapt to who you're working with and continue to make changes that are effective and efficient so that, like you mentioned, you're skiing downhill and not climbing uphill, right? Yeah,
not making it painful in terms of like navigating and climbing. Just to give you another example, Adam. So if you look at the Microsoft VS Code marketplace and you go look for blockchain tools, at this point, NEO, we're actually number 3 after the likes of IBM and Microsoft. And so, for a startup like ours to come in very short order to be in the top 3 and play in the league with Microsoft, we feel like we've been making very good progress. Because, like you said, we understand developers. We've been there. We have built those platforms for millions of developers. And essentially, for me, this is doing something I've done before for one of the largest software companies in the world and saying, let's do it one more time, but let's do it for a world that is decentralized.
And I want to talk about, since you're talking about some priorities and adapting the chain and putting in these features like interoperability, right? Scalability, throughput, security, privacy. These are all concepts that the enterprise world has some concern about. Can you touch on that? And then also, to even take it one step higher, what's that decision process like? is it you that's making these decisions? Is it a team? Is it a governance model with the community? Because I know Bitcoin has its core developers and like they do one thing and then that's what they do. Ethereum has their own way of having a bunch of proposals and, you know, a lot of developers, but there's also a bottleneck there of like choosing which direction to go, you know, how to prioritize development. How does Neo tackle these challenges?
So let me go with the second one first. We'll come back to the first question, Adam. So we were able to learn from the likes of Bitcoin as well as the likes of Ethereum because they were a little bit ahead of us in the timeline. So we do have, much like Bitcoin, a core developer model. It's a globally decentralized team. We have developers in Asia, Latin America, in Western Europe, I mean, in Russia, you know, Australia. So basically, you pick your place, and we probably have somebody from the core dev team there. We also have this notion of proposals, right, and RFPs, and being able to have the community to discuss, to debate, and then to help us prioritize. Because obviously, at the end of the day, you know, it is our developers and certainly our users who know best in terms of what they want to see. So we do have the best, I would say, of both worlds. Now, on top of it, we obviously have our perspective and our insight based on decades of building tools and platforms. We're able to then bring this and harmonize and ensure that, you know, we have a thoughtful plan for the next 6, 12, 18 months. So to your first question, in terms of the ilities, so you're right. Enterprises look for, you know, a whole slew of ilities, scalability, you know, portability, interoperability, and so on and so forth. For me, it's a very simple model, Adam. It is about coexistence. There will not be any one chain. There will not be one stack. And so a focus, so I built the web services stack at Microsoft. And back then, we worked on standards for web services called WS Star, right? And so in some sense, we have seen the movie before. So interoperability, agreement in terms of the data formats, and agreements in terms of the protocols for interchange. That's all. Everything else, if you go beyond that, you will have resistance. So we are very committed, firmly in fact, we are one of the founding members of the Interwork Alliance. So back earlier this summer, we launched the IWA with a singular focus on interoperability. We're working with the likes of Microsoft and others in this space to ensure that, you know, as the sector matures, we have the interop capabilities. Everything else, security, scalability, and so on, that is intrinsic. The nature of the blockchain stack, its very intrinsic nature is about scale and distribution and security. It's a given, right? What is not given is interoperability and interconnectivity. And that's where we are very much, I would say, that is kind of my singular focus in terms of standards, is how do we ensure that our customers, developers, consumers, commercial and enterprise are able to then take the Lego pieces and put them together as they see fit, because they drive the business case and obviously the value scenario.
No, I think that makes total sense, and I haven't actually had anybody put it in that way, where, you know, the other intrinsic values are kind of inherited in blockchain, but the interoperability, which is a big, you know, issue with you know, chains and various programming and all that. So that's kind of some good points. Now, you bring up kind of enterprise as well, and I kind of want to touch on. Are you guys focused on enterprise adoption?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes,
sorry.
absolutely. Yeah.
Sorry, I was going to say, yeah, enterprise adoption. I mean, there's a lot of, you know, there's a startup world, and now the enterprises are dabbling into it, which they have been for, you know, quite some time, like 5+ years probably. What's your take on the enterprise, and how has that been going? I know we touched on it at the top of the hour of them, you know, exploring these technologies and already integrating it, running POCs and pilots. What's your feedback from them? I'm sure you have close communications and relationships. What are they saying, and what are your thoughts on how they're using it? What are some of the challenges there that maybe you're tackling, which interoperability and stuff like that? What's some feedback from the enterprise side?
Oh, so it's a wonderful question. So I think there are many pieces there. I will take two pieces. The first thing is the enterprise sector, and what am I seeing, what am I watching and learning? And secondly, our ambition in the enterprise sector, right? So firstly, I will tell you, Adam, you know, there is this tendency on the part of the enterprise, and I'm generalizing here, right?
Yeah.
You know, they have a bunch of pilots and POCs, but almost always they go nowhere. Here is why. Because enterprises have been so used to seeing platforms that look alike, they are unable to understand what makes an economic platform different. Meaning, they don't know how to work with incentives, Adam. IT has no understanding of incentives because they've spent 30, 40, 50 years, they're having to, right? And this is the big bottleneck, because not being able to comprehend incentives, they think of blockchain as one more infrastructure. So what do? They do the so-called re-platforming. They take the app and they shift it to blockchain, and they say, John, nothing's happening, what's new? Right? And my point is, of course, right, if you re-platform an existing app, you know, what is the big aha? There is no big aha, right? It's going to be more work for you. It's going to be more expensive because you're re-platforming it, right? Step back.
Probably slower.
Possibly, right? Because you're moving legacy stuff over. So here's the big aha, Adam. You know, to have an understanding of the economic incentive, the model, and then be able to design this thing which is more than an app. For example, governance, right? For decades, the IT industry has spent billions of dollars on governance. You know why? Because it's all extrinsic. You got to hire expensive consultants, busloads of them. They come over, they build plans, they build, you know, all these PowerPoint slides, and then you say, okay, but what's happening? Not much. The same thing around compliance. It's an extrinsic activity. You spend billions of dollars, right? But in the blockchain stack, because you have the economic model built in, governance and compliance are things you can enable as opposed to adding on. And when we cross that bridge in the enterprise sector, I guarantee you there'll be an explosion with respect to commercial usage. Absolutely, right? But that is taking time because IT still does not understand economics for good reason.
Yeah.
They never had to even think about economics, right? But whatever. The second part, so what are we doing? Absolutely, Adam. I mean, look, for us, the vision of the smart economy is about digitizing assets, any and all. And so we don't distinguish the commercial from the consumer or the enterprise. It's a given. And in fact, the reason we are working with in terms of standards is because we know this is a very big criteria with respect to commercial and enterprise customers. And we want to play a leading role to create this vision, not just for us, but for the industry. It is a polychain, right? It's a polyglot world. And so we remain firmly committed with respect to interoperability to enable these enterprise businesses to create value.
And how about this notion of decentralization, centralization, you know, to what degree? And then how does versus more efficiency and effectiveness? Because I feel like the DLT on the enterprise side, as you mentioned, maybe it's that first step of going private permission with a small consortium of parties involved, right? It's a distributed ledger, right, amongst the vendors and suppliers. I'm assuming it kind of goes in centralization to DLT, which enables efficiency and effectiveness, to the full spectrum of like decentralization, which is public, right? Public meaning that the global world can view these transactions and all that. And I know there's some delay, of course, or dilemma, because you know they hold so much power and data. Like, why would they open it up? What are you seeing in terms of like how blockchain? What's the purpose for them? Is it just for efficiency, which is just a DLT ledger amongst vetted partners, or is it towards like decentralization and more public chain rather than, or is it a hybrid? You know, now we have hybrid chains of the Hyperledger fabrics and connecting to Ethereum, and you guys have some going on. What are your thoughts there on that spectrum at a high level of the enterprise world and dabbling into this technology? Where is it really like a decentralized public chain, or we're just opening up the doors a little bit for our partners for efficiency and effectiveness, ultimately to maybe drive down costs or increase revenue or transparency? Like, is it a marketing tool, or what are you seeing from that end?
Oh, that's a superb question, Adam. So I'll give you my perspective on this, right? In the commercial world, especially in the enterprise sector, the word decentralization worries many people. It often scares them away.
Yeah.
Right? So the way I talk to them is, the blockchain economic model and platform is enabling fundamentally new and different ways of multi-party engagement, multi-party collaboration, multi-party commerce, and multi-party relationships, right? This is for me, I would say, the key shift in the enterprise mindset, right? If they purely see it as about efficiency or about one thing, yes, they will get it, but they will not exploit the full benefit, the value, that perhaps their competition might. So I would say strongly again, if there are folks listening from an enterprise background, this is about multi-party computing, right? And yes, there is an aspect of decentralization, but don't let that turn you away, because there is degrees of, like you said, decentralization. Oh, your first point is very interesting, Adam. I see a parallel with respect to cloud computing. So, 12 years ago, so I was there building and working on the early version of Azure. At that time, it was called Red Dot. That was the code name. And old timers will remember that, right? So for many years, the enterprises said, look, we like this cloud model, but we don't like this public nature of the cloud. We built our own thing called a private cloud. And they spent billions and tens of billions. To what purpose? It was all down the drain, because eventually, 2020, everybody, even public sector, even sovereign governments are on the public cloud. So I see the same thing. Like there will be resistance, there will be pushback, and there will be delaying tactics, with respect to private and hybrid. But eventually, as someone said, nature finds a way. Eventually we'll find a way where we will be all on public infrastructure. Of course, various degrees of decentralization, but it's a given. But I think the nature of IT and technology is that it's not a direct path. We have to meander our way along the way, but we will get there eventually.
And I think that's very important to note, in the sense of when we're talking about private versus public chains and this blockchain concept and fundamentals, that's where the innovation is, kind of on the public side, on what you can do with trust and multiple parties involved, in thousands and hundreds of, or hundreds and thousands of players kind of in that ecosystem. And that's where the innovation lies. I think if you didn't really care about that, then you can probably just use a centralization, type of system and call it a day. Because it's a different model, right? Like you say, keep saying, it's an economic model, it's an incentive model. It's a different way of doing business. And over a period of time, everybody's figuring that out. But it seems like the ones that failed were trying to implement blockchain into a blockchain into a centralized system, or Web 3.0 underlying fundamentals with the past, and that's not going to fly. Right?
Totally, good. Very well said. Because this notion of re-platforming, right, existing or legacy things onto this, it's not going to work. I mean, there's no true economic benefit, right? But really, like I said, it's, as you very well summarized, a fundamentally new way of multi-party computing, both for consumers and users, as well as enterprises and organizations. And the scale and the benefit of the public infrastructure is very much like the public cloud story, where eventually people will have to accept and take it. But they will try along the way to build private infrastructure. And of course, there will be some failures and some big, along the way. And eventually, much like 10 years later, we're saying, of course, look, if the Defense Department of large nations can use Amazon Web Services, then what is the blocker, if any, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I know we got just a couple minutes here. I want to conclude, but to ask a few final questions regarding, since you are lead developer and you're focusing on platforms, what kind of, for those looking to explore chains and where to build, why would they go to Neo in terms of, do you have any programs or initiatives or resources that you offer to help people start building and building cool things on the Neo platform?
Absolutely. We have a portfolio of efforts, amongst them efforts like EcoBoost, where we are able to incent and incubate early stage startups. We have an entire slew of efforts where we are able to support them from the Neo Foundation in terms of giving them grants, and we support them not just for the project, but over multiple years, obviously as they require, and we support them on the go-to-market and eventually the marketing efforts. But I will say one thing, Adam, on the Neo stack, as a developer, you could take VS Code, the tool you already know and used by 60% of the developers worldwide, and in under 5 minutes, you can build, debug, test, and deploy your first smart contract in under 5 minutes. It's like building a Lambda function on Amazon Web Services, and it's fun. Just for that one reason, I would say go try it out, give it a spin, and tell me what you think. I would love to get your feedback and tell us what we can do more to make it more fun, but also obviously to help you create business value as well.
No, that's perfect, and that's good to know, right? I think when everybody thinks of blockchain, and it kind of gets complicated, and right now we just talked about just the concept of blockchain. We didn't even get into the technicals, but the thing that you're promoting, which makes it great for developers, is streamlining that, offering tools, offering documentation, offering resources, right? So that when they come to Neo, they can get going rather quickly. If they're a developer already, some of this stuff you might need to learn on the fly. But outside of that, your core skills can transfer to start building products and working on projects.
Absolutely. You like C#, we have C#. You like JavaScript, TypeScript, Go, Python, you name it, right? So it's a polyglot bet we've made. And once again, all with this fundamental assumption that developing on the blockchain ought to be as smooth, and as much fun as skiing, right? And that is really the vision I'm driving forward for us. Otherwise, 20 plus million developers, they're going to say, what am I supposed to do, right? And we're going to be wasting time, right? So we don't want to, this is, it's a very fast moving space. And like I said earlier, my first point, right? The way the web was able to make the sort of boring internet into this massive machine of growth economically, I see asset digitization doing the same thing for the blockchain infrastructure. But for that, you need developers and tools, and that is why I'm here in Seattle building tools for developers.
Great, and those are good points. Our engineering team, right? We invest in early stage products through our accelerator, and then we have an engineering team, and our core focus was development. For the last, we've been kind of on the engineering technical side for with a few startups like 7 years now, right? And we've gotten into blockchain over the last 3 or 4 years. And these are the same concepts that when we advise consult our enterprises and working with other governments and states, we let them know the same thing. Like, we would love to, which we are, building some infrastructure, some middleware where your legacy systems may attach, but more importantly, your developers or your IT team, which may be small, could be large, know what to do with what they've been working on for a while, and streamlining that, like you mentioned, C++, Java, right? Whatever language you're familiar with, how can we allow, bring it up to them so that all they need to do is do what they've been doing for quite some time. So we share some similar views there, and I appreciate kind of your insights for the last, close to an hour here. But I'll go ahead and conclude this. Where can people find you or these developers? Is there a Discord channel, Telegram, or visit the website?
So the easiest way is neo.org, and certainly the Neo GitHub project. So you can reach me and others. Send us email, ping us on GitHub, whatever you like. We're on Telegram. We're on a whole host of these messaging channels. But I would say for developers, the GitHub place and the Neo.org website are probably the first place to go to. And by the way, please send me feedback. I want your feedback. Tell us what you like, tell us what you don't like, and tell us what you would like to see, because then you're going to make me focus on those things for you, so I can build a better tool for you as developers.
Appreciate that. So we'll go ahead and conclude here. Just finished a conversation with John DeVadoss here of Neo, lead developer. Great individual. We've had him on twice now. We've had, I believe, a couple Neo workshops on the last Reimagine. So please visit the RI2020.io website, or you can go to Reimagine 2020, the YouTube channel, subscribe there. It's all free. You can catch the workshops. You can catch his previous fireside chat, and you can catch this one on there as well. So I'll go ahead and conclude with that. John, again, thank you for joining us. Appreciate you taking the time out of your day. We're fan favorites and appreciate being partners together, and we hope to have you back soon.
Absolutely. Thank you, sir. You have a very good week. Okay. Take care. Bye bye.